So my name is Elizabeth Wiley. I'm the immediate past president of the American Medical Student Association. And I think the question is pretty broad-based, which is, what is the role of students in kind of defining transdisciplinary professionalism and in the ABMS process and sort of the way that these concepts are defined?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Again, I'm going to speak from the perspective of medicine and from the perspective of the U.S. I like to think of the role of students as being potentially profoundly influential, and I'll give you one case example. And the case example has to do with conflict of interest. By and large, a major driving force in the U.S. with respect to conflict of interest is AMSA, American Medical Student Association. AMSA, over the past several years, has sponsored I think along with now the Carnegie Foundation, but a poll of U.S. medical schools examining their conflict of interest policies. And this is an online dynamic assessment of those policies. I can certainly remember when I was at the University of Minnesota and Minnesota's ranking came out. Minnesota did not have a ranking. Schools are rated A through E. And with the first ranking, there were only a handful of schools that were A. A majority of U.S. medical schools at the time, and I can't remember when the first ranking came out, were D and E, with a number of them being no ranking because they hadn't supplied any information. And that's where the University of Minnesota was. In part, they didn't supply any information because there was no information to supply. There wasn't a policy at the time. And so the then dean put together a conflict of interest policy committee, which I was on. And at the time, the official position of the university was this had nothing to do with AMSA. I think it had everything to do with AMSA. And over time, the rankings, and I'll believe in the integrity of AMSA's ranking system, rankings of medical schools with respect to their both the presence of policy and the adequacy of those policies as far as AMSA is concerned have improved dramatically. Now, I don't know what other kinds of initiatives medical students can take. I think they can serve informally within schools and programs as sort of, they're new visitors to a new land. They come in and they see things and they say, why are things this way? This seems rather strange or odd. And in some cases, I hope, faculty listen and say, oh, well, we hadn't looked at that quite that way before. It's all kind of like a hidden curriculum issue. And yet, healthcare is still extremely hierarchical. And as such, I think the voices do travel upward, but with increasing softness as it gets higher up in the hierarchy. So, yay, good stuff. How it gets broadened from conflict of interest, which I think has had a powerful impact, to other kinds of professionalism issues, I'm not sure. But I would welcome learning more from you about what you have for us in the future, and maybe you can change my thinking on some things. So please, talk to me later. Malcolm.
Malcolm Cox. Hi, Fred.
Yes, you are.
Thank you for for your comments, provocative as usual. I wanted to raise an issue that's beginning to increasingly concern me because I get a lot of comments about it. And that is the potential conflict between transdisciplinary professionalism, nicely described in your slides, Cynthia, I think that final slide, and the erosion of individual professional identity formation. And so people who I think are perhaps not as thoughtful as they should be will come forward with the concept that, well, are you really talking about a single profession? And I put that in quotes, obviously. But there is a tension, I think, between sharing something as valuable and dear as professionalism in the transdisciplinary sense, and what that might do to the individual group's identity formation, which is what we spend a lot of time on in education, honing and refining that particular identity. So I wondered if you could help us with that a little bit.
Can I say no? In terms of helping, I mean, that's actually when I got to see the list of occupations that were going to be represented here, as well as the list of countries. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to come, was because this issue intrigues me. It's very fascinating for me to sit down with one occupational group, let's say medicine, and talk to me about, and now I'll use the T word, teamwork. And the conversation about what teams mean and how teams operate and, I don't know, flatness and all this kind of stuff here. Then I go down the hall and I sit down with a group of nurses. I say, talk to me about what teamwork looks like. It's a different conversation. It's not the same teamwork. And, you know, I'm not going back up the hallway to the first group and say, I mean, do you know what the second group thinks about what you think about teamwork? I mean, I just scurry back to my office and I go, this is kind of interesting. So how are you going to mute in some fashion occupational identity so that it becomes trans-occupational identity? I hope I'm not being, how do I want to say it? I tend to stay away from the word interprofessionalism and those types of things, as I don't like the notion of pre-subscribe. The term interprofessional to me is a political concept. Okay? Calls everybody a profession. Now, whether they are or they aren't, according to sociology definitions and stuff, not interesting to me right now. What's interesting to me right now is you have all of these different occupational groups that are slugging it out. One of the points I wanted to make in the slides, Malcolm, is that, and let me go out on an edge. I don't care what you all do in medical school, nursing school, PT school. I don't care if you put everybody in the same classroom together and you have each other hold hands while other people give lectures. As long as there's fighting upstream within medical practice, within, let's just call it Practice Act legislation, everything you do is going to be washed away because the leaders are out there slugging it out with the legislators about who gets to do what and who gets to be reimbursed. You can spend oodles of time, and it's not what do I know? It's not going to make any difference. So why don't you start with, I don't know, Practice Act legislation, or why don't you start with reimbursement issues and then get around to the educational stuff? I don't think starting with the educational stuff is going to matter worth a whit.
Hi, my name is Leanna Orsolini, recently unemployed. Uh, my question is, where's the patient in interprofessional? I mean, we're called by the Affordable Care Act to increase the level of patient engagement. Is there a word that captures frontline workers as well as professionals, but includes the patient and their families? I just don't want to lose that piece.
I'm guilty of this. You know, I don't think the word patient appeared at all in my comments, so shame on me. One of the things that I have the hardest job getting a hold of, I have some colleagues in the UK, and we Skype and talk about professionalism issues. So I'm thinking of one individual that some of you know, Sir Donald Irvine, who was president of General Medical Council, and Donald would say the public. And I don't know how to think about, in the US, in this pluralistic society, the public or patients. What are patients? What is the public? We have all kinds of publics and all kinds of interest groups and everything else. Now, this is not necessarily how things are in other countries. And one of the things I'm hoping is, at least for me, as being a part of this conversation, is that individuals from other countries can help the US begin to think about how to think collectively. Because at least for me, I'm not necessarily saying this is true for other people in the US, I have an awfully hard job getting my hands around notions of the public. UK doesn't seem to have that problem at all. But then they have a national healthcare system. They're a much smaller country. You know, lots of different factors. So how do we get, to say, patients involved? By and large, the professionalism discussion, at least within allopathic medicine and at least within the US, has been an internal discussion. We have not, like has taken place in Canada, had public forums around issues of professions and professionalism and issues of practice and quality. We haven't done it. We haven't had sort of, I'm going to use it, town halls. Why don't we do that? Why don't we put together a series of town halls where we go out and engage, but by we I mean healthcare. That'll be interesting. Who gets to go? I mean, who gets to represent healthcare? And who's going to decide that? One doctor, one nurse, one who else? But anyway, maybe we can figure out how to do that, and in figuring out how to do the town halls, we'll begin to figure out how the we across different occupational groups. I don't know, I'm just talking off the top of my head. This is nothing I've given any amount of even moderately profound thought to.
Fred,
Yes.
first of all, let me thank you on behalf of everybody for that really terrific, provocative talk. A lot of issues we could tease out, but there was one comment you made that I want to try to push back on a little bit and see whether we can come to agreement. You define professionalism as a belief system, correct?
Okay.
The forum is charged with trying to do something actionable, trying to get something moving in the real world that has impact. I would assert that professionalism as a belief system can be manifest only by behaviors, individual behaviors and institutional behaviors, which are the aggregate of individuals. Obviously, institutions don't have behaviors independent of the people who are populating them. And so it seems to me that the issue really is, what are the behaviors that constitute professionalism that can be measured and monitored and improved and taught and evaluated, and et cetera? And what are the motivations that people have to behave in that way that is professional as we define it? And as I agree with your notion of evolving, for sure, it's a changing target, it's a changing set of behaviors, but it's, to my mind, it's not a belief system that you can actually, that concept doesn't translate for me into something that's actionable, whereas the behaviors that are manifest could be.
I was just asking a question if we could put up because that was what I was operating off of, the ABMS definition. But as we're looking for that, I want that, I have no disagreement with what you're saying, except I want to move a little further. I don't know if it's right to say back upstream from the manifestation of it to the notion that there is some conjoint agreement across medicine that this is what we stand for, this is what we believe in, this is medicine's professing to the public about its what the public can expect from medicine, both in terms of competencies and ethics. How does medicine at all come to, across its different occupational sectors, a sense of shared notion of what it means to be a professional, and that it has done work to do that? Then, off of that, we might get to the notions of how this now, singular, identity of competency standards, ethical values, this is how they're manifested among trainees, and that we would not have, for example, jurisdictional differences, pediatrics, whatever. I know that, and Matt can speak better to this than I can, that there's at least a desire within the ABMS to use, because again, this definition was created within an umbrella, if you will, an umbrella organization representing a variety of occupational groups. Can we use this definition to transcend individual occupational notions of what it means to be a good profession? I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think a number of these issues will be coming up again and again. We had a number of other people that wanted to speak right now, but to stay on schedule, we're going to have to kind of, we have 3 minutes? Okay. We have a 30-minute break. Would you like to spend a few more minutes talking? Okay, and then we'll take, you have to be back on time from your break. Okay, there was a question here, and then there was and then George had a question, and also Carol had a question. What? Okay.
My bad hearing.
Yeah, I'm going to help. Yeah.
So, Warren Newton, also following up on the ABMS question and sort of following up on the issue of behaviors. Can we really get at shared beliefs without dealing with behaviors? And particularly since we're beginning to get, at least at the level of individual practitioners and their aggregates, measuring professionalism in important ways, or at least getting better than we used to along those lines.
No, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that measurement and assessment of professionalism is at least an implicit definition. I mean, it defines it operationally. I'm curious, empirically, I'm curious if how I might be able to see the variety of ways, and I'm not saying they're different, just the variety of ways that professionalism has been operationalized, assessed, whether those assessment activities have managed to influence how professionalism is defined and conceptualized. You know, do we in fact have a loop, and can I see that loop? I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying that would help me to understand the professionalism movement a lot better, to see, you know, again, call for definitions, call for assessments, and then how those assessment activities have in fact shaped definitions, whether they're formal definitions or not. And that would be very interesting to me.
Carol, and then George, and then I'll finish.
Fred, thank you. As always, you stimulate me to think about things I haven't thought about before, which I hope is good. I'm optimistic, so I'm going to assume that the professions and the public could get together in some shared conversations about common ideas. But I wonder how we would get the structures changed that you pointed out get in the way of professionalism. Strong public opinion wasn't effective recently on gun control legislation. What are your thoughts about what might capture the mind of the policymakers so that we could get some structural change?
Thank you. I have been saved by Matt because I just heard that Matt's going to discuss that. I mean, oh, Matt didn't tell you who he was going to? I apologize.
No,
I just
no, it actually structures for how to do that will be part of your table discussion a little bit later. So yes, you'll be talking more about that. And you're going to develop the answers for this, okay?
No, thank you, because I've been standing up here deathly afraid that with each question I was digging myself deeper into a hole, and you just put me into a hole that I didn't have any answer to at all. So I have been saved.
Remember, we are creating things here. We are not necessarily going where we've been before. George.
Thanks for a great talk, insightful and entertaining. But I want to challenge you on one thing you said.
I knew it.
And I agree entirely that we've got to deal with that upstream dissonance that you talked about. But to say that that must be dealt with before we do anything in education, and that whatever we do in education is worthless unless we've resolved that upstream dissonance, I challenge.
Oh,
because it underestimates the powerful potential of education, of actually being the vehicle to resolve that upstream dissonance, that generating not only the expectation among the health professions, but the leadership of tomorrow is in fact how we will resolve that upstream dissonance. And if we wait to resolve it before we change the educational system, it probably won't ever happen.
I love the pushback. I said what I said, hoping that there would be a variety of people who would be upset either with me personally or with what I said. But you know, that's the fun of being able to stand up here. I'd be this is not a pushback, but I'd be very interested in understanding conceptually how that will all work out. Meaning, for example, do medical school deans, you know, travel to state legislators, or to not medical school deans, so deans of the various health occupation schools travel to state legislators to argue about Health Practice Act legislation. Let me just say one other thing. it was revelatory for me to spend a little bit of time talking with the subcommittee within the Minnesota State Legislature that deals with all of these things, because what did of the many things I learned, one thing that that surprised me but shouldn't have surprised me was that the group that most often lobbied on behalf of new Practice Act lines, where the dental hygienists were lobbying to be practitioners, and I will stop with gratefulness. The group that most often lobbied for these new training standards and new programs, et cetera, were universities. And why? It's new business. They get to create new courses, they get to create new training programs, they get new sources of revenue. So somehow the health occupations are also going to have to do some measure of battle with the university structure itself that benefits from these new lines of demarcation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to remind us of one of the core findings in psychological science is that attitudes can change behavior and behavior can change attitudes. It's not a one-way street. And so what we're talking about is really both attitudes and behaviors and how we get some synchrony between them. So in any case, please be back here by 10:30 and we'll start again. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much.